Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. To help keep this podcast free, we're partnering with Stoke Seeds. More than just a listing of vegetable and flower seeds, the Stoke Seeds website is a complete resource center with valuable information on seed starting, planting, and harvesting, plus all the gardening accessories you need to make your garden the envy of the neighborhood. Pre-order your free 2018 gardening guide today from stokeseeds.com, cultivating successful growers for generations. We'll have more to come from Stoke Seeds in the next few weeks. Now, on to today's question. Fred, it is this time of year when we really start to appreciate those windbreaks that we put in.
Yes.
To try to slow that wind down a little bit and keep it off the house and keep it off the plants. And tips for a windbreak.
Well, tips for a windbreak. Number one, we talked, we have talked about large evergreens. And when you have a lot it's large enough to handle the big evergreens, and that, of course, can be varied. I'm going to say that the arborvitae, juniper, and taxus group will hit into the 12, 15, and 20-foot range of height. If you have enough space, you can go on into the spruce and pines that will get up in 20, 30, even 40 feet tall. Those will indeed break up the wind. They deflect it around your house. And that is good. Then there are windbreaks that are built by the season by some people who live near a roadway where it gets salted or they get brine on them. That wafts at a 40, let's just say a gentle 40-mile-an-hour car driving down the road kicks up a bunch of spray. And if you're downwind, it's going to hurt, even to the extent in the New England states, they have done some research. It's been a while back to where I think it's up to 200 feet from the roadway. The salt spray will affect the growth of sugar maples, and they've more or less proved that. So, several places here in Columbus, a couple that I have kind of helped create where we have planted arborvitae or what have you, as a matter of a windbreak, a shade pattern, a whatever. And then, because it is exposed to this salt spray, it looks a little strange, but to keep everything going, several of the folks will buy burlap in a roll, 3 foot in height, and just pin it, and almost literally pin it to the evergreens so that the salt is stopped by the burlap. Well, at least slowed down, rather than being a killer. Because I know for sure that some plants that are susceptible to salt damage, they can be totally killed, or it can kill the roadside side and so on. So there are several things. Number one, start with wilt stop. That, as well as a vapor barrier for the plant's tissues, will be holding the salt off of the actual structure of the plant, at least to a considerable extent. I don't know, I've not done it, but I'm going to bet if wilt stop is helping, let's just give it a 90-day active life. You put it on several weeks ago. You'd want to redo it late February, just because the snow keeps coming, the highways are still salted and so on, the windbreaks. And then I'm going to go another step, and that's way down into the yard itself. Many people call in because they have a hydrangea and it doesn't flower. Well, there are a whole bunch of possible reasons for that, being the kind of plant, being where it's planted and so on. I have on several occasions told people to put some stakes in the ground that are taller than the hydrangea, or at least covering the bottom 2, 3, 4 feet, wrap burlap around it, and then dump, and I like to say oak leaves because they stay lofted up a little better, making an air pattern barrier in between themselves. Dump the leaves loosely down in there, and it doesn't stop them from getting bone-chilled cold. It just simply stops the fast changes. And I think sometimes, I know in a couple of occasions over the years, people have brought plants that were not flowering into a reasonable level of flower. Now, you can only do so much, but I'm thinking of a L-shaped home now where the wind came out of the southwest, blew into the alcove or the partition in this house's shape, and it just about burned the hydrangeas to the ground. After my oak trick, they came along and they flowered. So it works to a considerable extent anyhow.
Now, if you're looking to build a windbreak, if the wind whips from the north or northwest, and you're looking to build a windbreak, do you? Two questions, really.
Okay.
First question is your choice of plants. Do you put all the same plant in?
Mark, that's a variable answer, because I'm going to say in most residential situations where lots are a quarter of an acre or even a half an acre, you don't have enough space to put in a mixture as I might think of it. But at the same time, if you do have that half acre and you're dealing with that northwestern exposure, et cetera, you could put in 5 spruce and 3 pine and blend it across there. But most of the time, we only have really room visually and physically for one kind. So let's just say it is a mixed answer. Bigger the space, the more latitude you'd have for change.
And do you put them in a straight line, or do you stagger them? What do you do?
Staggered, in my opinion. Now, again, it has to do with space.
Sort of one up, one back, one up,
right.
One back.
Exactly. Let's just say you have 2 lines of plants, not necessarily straight lines even. They can run like a river does. And I would put, if I was using spruce or pine, I would put the rows 12 feet apart, and I would put the plants in at 10-foot centers. Okay. And then the first line at 10-foot centers, then you'd go off center to the rear line so that you double up this whole thing. The worst case scenario where there is a little bit of space to work with is a place north of Columbus where a windbreak hill was provided because of the excess soil. And then using pitifully small plants, but somebody with the right intent but wrong directions planted a row of pines on the very top of the mound. The mound had a little bit of a curve to it, so they planted on top. But you're now down on a roadway 12, 14 feet below them. You're looking up under the pines. Their skinny little bodies just... It just didn't do the job. Where if they had planted some either side of the crown or downhill from the crown and staggered, they could have created a very, very interesting pattern and got a better windbreak.
Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you have a question for Fred, go ahead and email us, fred@planttalkradio.com. And for the best selection of vegetable, flower, and herb seeds available, go to www.stokeseeds.com. Pre-order your free 2018 gardening guide today from stokeseeds.com. Cultivating successful growers for generations.